welcome. We're so glad you're here. I would also like to take this opportunity to recognize my other commissioner colleagues who are here. So if you would raise your hand when I call your name. Chair Shanika Thomas in the room. We also have Vice Chair Susan Evans. Commissioner Vicki Adamson. Commissioner Don Mile. And Commissioner James West. So greetings from my colleagues. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you all today as we celebrate Wake County's first ever Interfaith Diversity and should have a round of applause for that, right? I really appreciate this special opportunity for Team Wake as we gather together in fellowship and the celebration of what makes each one of us unique. We'll be hearing about that a little bit later with our panel discussion, and you will also have an opportunity to ask questions as an audience a bit later. But I would also like to take a moment to recognize and thank our WakeUP staff members who organized this event. So if you had a hand in organizing this event, please stand up so you can be recognized. Thank you all so much. So today's Lunch and Learn event serves two purposes. First, to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. While the MLK holiday was formally observed on Monday, today we continue to honor him as a leader who transformed our country with his extraordinary vision, hard work, and gifts as he worked to bring people together for common cause. We are reminded of the deep connections between his vision and our work at Team Wake. Dr. King's vision of the beloved community where all people are valued, respected, and treated with dignity. In the future, we are working to build every day. So he worked, obviously, to say all people are valued, respected, and treated with dignity. And this is the work that we are working to build every day here in Wake County. 50 years after his death, our nation continues to grapple with racial injustice, economic inequality, and also polarization and divisiveness. It is clear that there's still work to do. As we reflect on his legacy and contributions to racial and economic justice, we must remain committed to the work, that work of promoting equity and dignity for all. So our second purpose today is to celebrate and discuss this idea of bringing your entire self to work. So that includes the uniqueness of spirituality and religion. For many religious people, faith is connected to deeply held values, which inform their actions and thoughts at work just as much as in our personal lives. So when colleagues feel connected to share their religious beliefs, we can gain a of our coworkers as whole people. You've probably heard that saying that we have more in common together than what divides us, but it's also okay to celebrate, honor, and recognize the differences among us. And we are working to create that safe space here today so that we can do just that. When we go beyond simply tolerating or coexisting with differences, but really celebrate them and see the beauty in them, then that's when we can come together to make positive changes in our community and in our world. So for me personally, I am grateful that I've had opportunities in my own faith community to learn about different world religions, particularly after 9/11, when religious hate and vitriol surged. The deacons and clergy at my church, Memorial Baptist Church, our deacons and our clergy reached out to other faith members in our community to incorporate them in education programming on Wednesday nights, and also we invited them to lead worship. A little technical difficulty here. Okay. About this. Is this working? Okay, this is. Maybe it's time for me to sit down. Okay. So in addition to that, I also chaired a sanctuary art project at Poland that intentionally integrated images of diversity and inclusion, including images of the Jewish and Muslim faiths. So in 2016, we installed 2 large pieces of artwork in our sanctuary that intentionally included diversity and inclusion and images of the Jewish and Muslim faith. And within that art, we had text that anchored the work, and the text was ever embracing and ever becoming. So through these experiences, the members of my faith community have witnessed the love, kindness, and connection that are central to all faiths, as well as their unique differences. So I'm excited that we will have a similar experience like that today. So welcome to our wonderful speakers who have graciously volunteered their time and wisdom today, and mostly important, welcome to you, Team Wake. We're so glad you're here. We are an organization that strives to prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we can't do that without each of us committing to that work. So we thank you for being champions of change. This is just the start of opportunities as we celebrate our beautiful differences and the uniqueness of our culture. Now, if you would, help me welcome Trinicia Martin to the stage.
See. Testing. Ooh, got it. All right. Excited. The Equity and Inclusion Committee comprised of employees across all departments within Wake County and the office. Which one? Well, okay. Carrie, so we'll just do this. So this, again, event is brought to you all by the Cultural Affairs Subcommittee, which is part of the Greater Wake Up Committee, and the Diversity of Equity and Inclusion Office, which i.e. Danya Perry and his team. So the purpose of this subcommittee, when we created it, was to bring cultural awareness to employees so that we can better understand our colleagues, so that we can better work together, so that we can achieve all of the great things that we do on a day-to-day basis here at Wake County. Now let's thank our wonderful commissioners for their support, because we do have a board that's very employee-friendly, as you all can tell by the wonderful things they've done over the last several years for us. So if you wouldn't mind, join me in just giving them a warm thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Stallings, for your very kind and warm, inclusive remarks. Mr. Ellis had to step out, but none of this would be possible without him. He is a man with a vision, and it was because of his vision, this is why we are all here today. So we have a great leader, and although he's not here, David, we thank you. All right, enough of the preliminary, so now let's just kind of get started with the program. So we've got some very phenomenal speakers that are here joining us on this stage today, and I'm excited to introduce you to our panel moderator, Reverend Lisa Yaboa. Did I get that right? Yes. Woo, yes. Reverend Yaboa currently serves as lead pastor of Southeast Raleigh Table. That's a worshiping community right here in Raleigh. She's a graduate of Wofford College and Duke University Divinity School. What fuels her life and ministry is seeing people become their best selves, and in turn, seeing the world becoming more just and collectively marked by liberation. She's deeply invested in the Raleigh community, and her works speak for itself. She's an advocate for affordable housing, living wage, and equity in public education. She is a glutton for joy. Some even say she's a self-professed party starter. She's a people watcher and admits to having just a little bit slight obsession with 90s R&B music, which I happen to like myself. Yes. So please help me welcome to the stage Reverend Yeboah. Thank you.
Hello, beautiful people. My name is Reverend Lisa Yeboah. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I serve as the lead pastor of the Southeast Raleigh Table, which is a worshiping community here in Raleigh. And I just am so grateful for the invitation from Danya to be able to hold space this afternoon for us to have this, I think, incredibly important conversation around interfaith dialogue. Let me just share with you the arc of what our conversation. Oh, you're okay, good. I'll share with you the arc of what our conversation is going to look like. So for 50 minutes, I'm going to get to be like Oprah Winfrey, and we'll get to ask questions of our wonderful panelists who are here. But I want you to also hold any questions that you have in your heart or scribble them down on paper, because we'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A, because this is indeed a conversation among all of us. And so please do know that we want to engage you as well in the midst of this time. If you see me scribbling down notes, I promise I'm not writing the next New York Times bestseller. I'm simply listening to what these wonderful individuals, my siblings and co-laborers, are having to say, so that we can make this the most productive conversation as possible. I've had an opportunity to introduce myself, and I want now for you to get to know these wonderful individuals who are on this panel. And so I'm going to just start first by asking each of our panelists to share who they are and the faith tradition that anchors them. And Dr. Sharma, we'll start with you.
Okay, I think this is better, right? I'm Madhu Sharma, and I belong to a Hindu Society of North Carolina, which was actually started by my parents back in 70s. But I also served as a Duke Hindu chaplain at Duke University for over 8 years and retired just recently, last year, actually, or a year and a half ago, maybe. So.
I'm Rabbi Lucy Dinner, and apparently the only one that is on your screen for the rest of the program.
Yes. We know who you are.
No reflection, because I stand among esteemed colleagues who it really is a privilege to be here and a part of my mission at Temple Beth Or, where I've been serving for 30 years, and I'm part of Reform Judaism, not Reformed. We're not done. We're still reforming, and so happy for this opportunity.
Good afternoon. I am Michael Brickhouse. I serve as the pastor of Cary First Christian Church in Cary, North Carolina. Also, I serve as the director of educational programming and grants at the Leadership Education at Duke Divinity School, and I'm grateful to be here today.
My name is Jim Seymour. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. If I think back to my high school and early university days, my classmates would be astounded that I was allowed on this stage, because I didn't have a religious bone in my body. But between my first and second year of university, I prayed a prayer that changed the direction of my life. I've been recently the pastor at North Haven Church on Six Forks Road for 13 years. I've been a professor for 26 years at St. Augustine's University. 12, come on, Falcons, we got some Falcons? Oh yeah. For 12 years as the chair of the Religion and Philosophy Department. I've already met 3 of my students here today. I hope I gave you an A. I just hope I did. And for the last 14 years as an adjunct professor, as I've had other duties elsewhere. But I'm delighted and honored to be here in this esteemed company, and I hope this is a productive time for each of us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anisa Khalifa. I am the chair of the Advocacy Committee at the Islamic Association of Raleigh. And in my day job, I'm a journalist at the local NPR station, WNC. A lot of my work has to do with identity, culture. I have more than one podcast about Muslim identity. So I am honored to be in this company. I don't know, I guess I belong here because God wanted me to be here. So it's really an honor to be here with all of you.
Can we just give our panelists a round of, applause. As I was thinking about the questions that we were going to chat through, whenever I'm asked about, the church that I serve or the faith tradition that I'm anchored in, sometimes I find myself automatically offering caveats, like, oh, I'm anchored in the Christian tradition, however, this is not how I show up in the world, or this is how I show up in the world. Because we oftentimes, when we talk about who we are or the faith that we're anchored in, those conversations oftentimes look more like over and against one another. So I want to just invite you to respond to why is it then that interfaith dialogues and conversations so important, especially in a world that oftentimes does not know how to live at intersections?
I'll begin, if you will. I think that interfaith dialogue is the opening to understanding, not the only opening, but one of the openings, that we are all part of a greater universe, and yet we're on our own path in that universe. And as we begin to understand each other's paths, we serve our own and we serve our world with greater clarity and blessing.
If I can add to that, I think there are a couple of quotations that's going on here that we've read, that religion, all religions, in my opinion, are compassion and kindness is part of all of them. And if we share our details of how we celebrate those or how we practice those, it becomes easier to understand each other, no matter what faith that is.
I think what is also unique about interfaith conversations, as you look at world religions, there's always stories that demonstrate radical hospitality. Mm-hmm. And when you focus on those stories of radical hospitality, it really puts it puts these conversations around division and exclusion to a separate category, and to say that that's a fringe element of the faith, not the core root of the faith. At the core root are people who are learning and striving to be radically hospitable, not just to those of their faith, but to all of humanity.
I would also add that I think that our beliefs determine our behavior. So there are those who declare a certain belief and they can quote it and spew it out in a moment, but their actions are not consistent with what they say they believe. If you are embracing and espousing a particular faith, be that, live that, treat other people with respect and kindness and forgiveness and patience, or just be quiet because you're embarrassing your faith. When your beliefs and your behaviors are not congruent. So I'm very much an advocate that we need to live out what we say we believe. And if we do, I think we can really change the discussion, the climate, civility in the community, in the workplace. Absolutely, it makes a difference, but don't quote it if you're not going to live it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think for me as a Muslim, our best example is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And what I've learned from his life is that he was always cooperating with people of other faiths and of different ideas. And that was whether he was in a position of weakness or in a position of strength. You know, whether it was in the beginning of when Islam first came and they were a persecuted minority, or closer to the end of his life when he, you know, the Muslims were in a better position and they were in charge, but they never, you know, his teaching was always to respect each other and to have space for everyone and to advocate, you know, for the oppressed person, no matter who that is. And I think that, like, as Rabbi Dinner said, interfaith dialogue is the first part of that, because we can't have relationships with each other unless we start to try to know each other. And those relationships are going to lead us to do bigger things, you know, like changing the world. But we can't change the world if we don't have a relationship.
That's good. That's good. You've already just modeled really beautifully kind of these common threads that allow us to in many ways not be over and against one another, but where there are intersections among our traditions. Can you maybe speak to what are some of the opportunities, and also to what are some of the challenges of interfaith dialogue within the workplace?
If I can start, maybe I have to borrow it. Sorry about that. But one of the things that, thank you. We'll just share, yeah. It's one of the things that actually people are knowing about is Diwali for a Hindu, religion, and you hear about it all over the TVs and celebrated at school. Holi at Duke and UNC is celebrated with hundreds of people now, hundreds of students, and so it's not just the religion, we're bringing the culture into workplace. And so some of the Hindus, if Wake County with the offices here, bring some food at Diwali time and some things to share with other people, non-Hindus. I think that goes a long ways of, it's not threatening, it's not about religion, it's about sharing the belief system in a more cultural way with food and colorful clothing and things.
I think that's beautiful, to be able to start from a place of sharing our own traditions. I think that the reality that I hear from my Jewish community often is a balance. If I reveal too much of myself, will that have either public or underpinning consequences for me in the workplace? And so there's always a balance to being able to put yourself out there and to feel safe in doing that. And yet our tradition says that we have an obligation to interact and to be a part of our community. So it's always weaving in and out.
I think we live in a society where we glorify the experts, and we do so in a way that eliminates curiosity among people. And as the challenge is to know that people can be just curious, and that the questions that we ask are not questions out of judgment, but they're questions just to learn. And I think if we had a posture of curiosity and celebrated the curious spirit among people, it would open the doors where we could engage in some very fruitful conversations. I think just prior to the event occurred, Anisha was telling me about something that's happening within her, with the imam. They're looking for an imam. And I asked her a curious question. What does that process even look like? Like, I don't know. But it was a way for us to engage in a conversation that I learned something new today because I brought a spirit of curiosity with me. And I didn't feel like I came in here as an expert or I needed to be an expert on the subject matter.
I would also say in the workplace, the people who make that discussion difficult are people who are insecure in what they believe. So if somebody has a different belief experience, they're very threatened and they have to argue with them. I think that is so disingenuous. If you know what you believe and why you believe it, Other people's beliefs you can treat with respect and honor. I think even as we're on the platform today, we're not here because of our common theology. We believe different things, but our common humanity says we respect each other. You don't have to believe what I believe. I know what I believe, why I believe it, and you are free to believe something completely different. It doesn't threaten me, it doesn't make me angry, but I will treat you with respect and kindness and generosity, not because of common theology, but our common humanity.
I think before I move on to the next question, I wanted to see if anyone else wanted to respond to that. Michael, there was something you actually said. You used the word curiosity, and this isn't a question that's on the sheet that you got ahead of time. I'm going off script a bit because I do think it's so helpful sometimes to hear these personal stories, like of Michael and Anissa having conversation about this particular process within her faith community. Are there other moments when you were able to share yourself in regard to your faith tradition in a way that you felt like did not step over boundaries, or you were inserting yourself in ways that you were taking up too much space? I think it'd be helpful just to hear some examples of when you were able to share yourself or others shared of themselves in ways that felt honoring to you.
So my job is a little different in that I think my co-panelists here are full-time in their spiritual leadership roles, and mine is not full-time. But I think what I'm really blessed with is, on one hand, I think as far as I know, I'm the only Muslim at my whole company. But then on the other hand, because of the kind of work I do, I am able to bring myself. And in fact, I think like the culture in journalism is shifting to, acknowledging that no journalist is unbiased and you are bringing your full self. And I'm blessed to be in a workplace where there's an understanding that like who we are as employees and as journalists is making our work better. And I don't think like everyone is, in that kind of good situation. And I recognize that. But I think like in the workplace, you sometimes have to build on the relationships that you have. So, you might not share your religious traditions that you're going to be celebrating this weekend with your CEO or, your manager, unless you have a really great manager. But you might have colleagues that you eat lunch with every day, or that you work closely with on a regular basis, who you feel that you have enough of like a safe and healthy and good relationship with, and you can just naturally share things in a way that, here's this thing that I'm doing, here's why it's important to me. Would you like to share something about your own faith if you feel comfortable? That kind of thing.
I would like to just say one word of thanks to Rabbi Dinner. We met before we ate today. It was interesting that my plate was completely different than hers or our Hindu sister. It was an all-meat plate, so very different. But I thanked her for her kindness to a common friend, Pastor Paul Anderson, of a church called the Fountain of Raleigh. 13 years ago, Paul left a church to plant a church. He needed a space. He planted his church in her synagogue. For several years, she opened that sacred space of shared belief in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and some other theological differences. But that common opening of a place of worship helped to plant that church. And Pastor Anderson now has a lovely congregation and facility on Six Forks Road, right on the other side of the road where I've been at North Haven Church. But I thought that was perhaps the most outstanding example of sharing common faith, common respect, common love. And on behalf of my friend, I want to thank you again for that. How wonderful.
It's really interesting. It was one of the most sacred acts, I think, that we could engage in as a congregation to welcome the stranger in our midst. Because, and of course, Pastor Anderson was never a stranger. I came a year after the two of you did to the Triangle, and he's the most welcoming person I think, in the Raleigh community, but I'm prejudiced, that's okay. But what I will say is the interesting questions that we got from some in our community who, while our children were in religious school, downstairs, upstairs, there was a very joyous and sometimes loud expression of Christian faith. And when parents, more so than the kids were loving the music. And when they would say to me, what are our kids going to learn? And I said exactly what they need to learn, that we love one another, that we open space for one another to become our better selves.
And I would also add, so not only are we seeing that among faith communities, I have to lift up Wake County. I serve on the CAC in the Western region, and I don't know if Karen Moran is in here, but I must say we do it best in the West. But during the pandemic, when the schools were closed, we came together, number of faith communities, not just Christian, but our Muslim brothers and sisters, our Hindu brothers and sisters, those at the Sikh temple. We came together to open up our worship facilities to serve meals and to be a part of the meal distribution program here in Wake County, to serve the people in our community who were suffering as a result of the closures of restaurants and schools, especially our young people who are on free and reduced lunch that relied heavily on the school systems for breakfast and lunch. And during that time, it was such a beautiful sight to see people from various faiths begin to volunteer, not at their worship facility, but at a variety of sites across, and I can only speak to what I saw within Cary and Apex, across the Cary and Apex area, to serve our community and to say, we know that we are all enduring this pandemic, but we're going to come together in this partnership between government and faith communities to make sure that we're serving the common good. And if we can build relationships out of this, that's even better. And so there were some genuine relationships that came out of serving together and being in a space where we honor and respected our shared humanity because we were struggling together. And in that struggle together, I think we persevered because we relied on one another, and it showed the value of all of our faiths, that there always exists this generative love. And by that I mean, present in our faith is the love of humanity, but that love is not just a spoken love. It's a love that then is meant to do something. That's right. And so in this moment, we were doing something, and we showed our society, our community, what it looks like when people of faith could come together to make a difference.
Reverend Brickhouse, you teed me up beautifully to ask this next question. On Monday, we were obviously celebrating the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Dr. King's faith and his social justice and his movement was anchored in the fact that he was a person of great faith. It was what was kind of the fuel for very much the way in which he showed up in the world. For each of us and our own traditions, what is that tie between faith and our community's efforts to be inclusive and also just?
Well, if I can start that with Hinduism, is actually we when somebody asks me what is Hinduism about, the first sentence comes out is that Hinduism is not a religion, it is a way of life. And so we are who we are. We practice our religion through how we live, exactly like what you were saying earlier. I'm not saying that's true for everyone, but that's what we're supposed to be doing, and that's who we are. So practicing humanity, practicing treating others how we want to be treated is actually the basis of Hinduism. It's what it is, and being inclusive. It's more spirituality. What we kind of say what spiritual living is. Be who you are. It's the morality. Be a good person, treating others, how you want to be treated, and be kind and compassionate and all that. So it is ingrained on, or supposed to be ingrained on who we are, right? It's supposed to be in totality. Who Hinduism is actually kind of fabric of all these things that we just talked about. And so it's not one part of who we are. It is who we are, right? I think you were saying that earlier. But that's why in the community, if we go, we take who we are in the community and treat others that way too, because I believe all religion emphasize that or believe in that.
It's so striking to me that you say that, Dr. Sharma, because I always grew up also hearing this from my parents and from elders in the community, that Islam is not a religion, it's a way of life. Which is, and I was thinking of another teaching that we have. One of the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is, none of you truly believes until he or she loves for his brother or sister what he loves for himself. And I know that's, we call that the golden rule. It's something that is in so many of our traditions. And it's really, in that, and the scholars will say, like, the meaning of that is not your brother or sister in the faith, it's your brother or sister in humanity. And so I was raised in this very strong tradition of like service and the pursuit of justice, which is very much a part of Islam as a faith. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, if your neighbor is hungry, you did something wrong. Like, that's your responsibility. That was something that was very much part of my religious upbringing. And so, as you said, it's not something that is, a practice that you do only on one day of the week, and then the rest of the week you're just living your secular life. The values that we gain about, how we treat others, and, always searching for ways to make the world more just, and standing up and speaking in situations where something needs to be said. It's very, very tied into our faith tradition. And so, like the great leaders of our past, like Dr. King, like, all of the people who have come before us, our elders, in this struggle, I think like being rooted in your faith also gives you so much more power and motivation, and it also gives you a community of people to do that work with. And I think that's really beautiful.
I really love the thread that we're hearing that really unites us. And I want to reframe the question, if you'll let me. A 12-year-old who's beginning her studies to bat mitzvah saw me this week, and you know how 12-year-olds are, or maybe you don't, but if you don't, this will tell you. So I'm going through her Torah portion with her, talking about this and some of the moral teachings in her portion, and she says, well, why do I need the Torah for that? Everybody should just be good people. What's religion about? So I looked at her, very thoughtful and provocative and normal 12-year-old, and I said to her, we don't have the only way in the Torah. Judaism teaches that there are many paths to God and many paths to a good world, but the world needs an organizing force. If you believe that there should be goodness in the world, then you believe in a purpose. Now, there are those who believe that the world is chaos. And if you believe the world is chaos, you don't need religion, you don't need morals. Why be good rather than bad? And of course, her head was kind of spinning by that point. And I said, Judaism just offers us one path. And you can explore all the paths if you want, but find a path that grounds you so that you can create that world you want. And I think that all of us are seeing that rooted in faith, we can find a path to create something together. Go talk to your 12-year-olds.
I also just wanted to add in that we've just celebrated, of course, the life of Dr. King and his work. Last week I spent a little bit of time watching a DVD that I used to use for many years with my students at St. Augustine's in some of our classes, a video I really recommend, a DVD called We Shall Not Be Moved. We Shall Not Be Moved. And wonderful interviews with various folks who had been part of the movement. Andrew Young was a part of this, and just two of the students who had been at the Central High School in Arkansas when they integrated it, and on, just very well done. But it was pointed out that Martin Luther King always self-identified as a minister of the gospel. He didn't consider himself a politician or a social worker. He was living out the implications of his faith. His methodology came from Mahatma Gandhi in India. Peaceful resistance. They drove the British out of the subcontinent of India by resisting. The method came from Gandhi. The message from the teachings of Jesus. Forgiving, being kind, turning the other cheek. The bravest people I've ever read about are those who marched and didn't fight back. I question if I'm that brave. I don't know. If you slap me, you may be surprised. I don't recommend it. But a whole generation faced fire hoses and dogs and mean and evil men and women, and they didn't strike back. The methods of Gandhi, the message of Jesus applied, and it changed our country and our world. Do we still have a long way to go? We do. But don't miss the point. We've come a long way.
You know, in the midst of this pandemic, as we were sitting at home and could not distract ourselves, I think we had to sit in the discomfort of all the division, the ways in which we don't speak to one another in ways that are productive, how we tend to live on opposite sides of kind of this pendulum swing and cannot hold space for nuance. And in the last 3 years in particular, I have felt like when we talk about peace and unity and reconciliation, those words are no longer woo-woo. They really are like, they're counter to the ways in which we oftentimes operate. So I want to ask you, how can we, recognizing the world that we live in, how can we promote peace? How can we promote unity even among our differences?
So if I can start with the peace and unity, I know you talked about Gandhi. One of the things that's really interesting is that I grew up with yoga, breathing, meditation. Even 20 years ago, actually, even 10 years ago, meditation, breathing was not, it was a woo-woo thing, your spirituality and stuff. It's not anymore. Breathing is part of yoga because it came from thousands of years ago, but that's not what it's about. It is a physical, it's a part of the healthcare, it's wellness now. So it's amazing that it's common for all humans, no matter what we believe in. Breathing, slow down your breathing, taking a deep breath is not a religion. It unites us because it's common for all of us. Meditation now is big, but doesn't belong to Hinduism or Buddhism or Judaism or Christianity. It's for all of us. It's for human nature is what it is, that by all these things have now been proven by healthcare professionals. Why did we need the proof before we can unite? We could unite and say, okay, we can meditate together, or we can do deep breathing, or we can stretch, or whatever that is. But it's here now. So I think that is one part. It's about the wellness and the health of human beings. It's not part of any religion, or it's part of all religions, you could say, right?
I think that points out the nomadic culture of our faith, that the teachings of the faith, they all spread, but they spread in a way that those that were sharing that message had to get to know those that they were in community with. And so when we're talking about this concept of peace and unity, how can I have peace and unity with someone who I do not know? And I'm not talking about theoretically. I'm saying I need to spend time in community and communion with my brothers and my sisters so that I might know who they are and they may know who I am, and then we can learn from each other. The more time we spend with each other, the better. But yet now we live in a world where we are isolating, and we had to isolate during the pandemic, and it intensified the isolation that has come through social media, because you follow me, you think you know me. But you have no idea who I am. And you only see the image or the side that I portray in this platform. But when I take the time to break bread with someone, or I think about one of the greatest missionaries in the Christian faith, the Apostle Paul, who was a tent maker, who went around traveling and getting to know people before he even preached. He just took time to get to know people for who they were. It teaches you about human behavior. It teaches you about lessons that we can apply from one another. And so I think as we are on this pursuit for peace and unity, it's going to involve the hard work of putting down technology and embracing conversation with one another, face to face.
I would also just like to say, whenever I speak at a workshop or a seminar or attend one, or even preach a sermon, I often like to challenge people. Find one thing, listen, for one thing that you can begin to apply in the next 24 hours. If not, we've both wasted our time. If you can't find one thing. And so a common theological belief found in every religion on this platform and beyond, in Christianity we refer to it as the golden rule: do unto others the way you would have them do unto you. Now some have corrupted that and say, do unto others before they do it to you. That's not what I'm talking about. But treating other people the way you would like to be treated. Just think about that. Treating other people in your house at supper tonight, in the office when you head back today. Treat other people the way you would like to be treated. Not the way they treat you, the way you would like to be treated. If you will model that, the one word you have to take with you is intentionality. You have to be intentional. It takes 21 days, psychologists tell us, to develop a new habit. 21 days repeating something, it becomes a habit. If you leave here today intentionally saying out loud to yourself, I'm going to treat other people, my wife, my children, my husband, my neighbor, my grandkid, whoever, I'm going to treat them the way I would like them to treat me. Try it for 30 days. In 30 days, you'll change your life and their reality. I believe it.
I just want to add one thing, if I may. Reverend Brickhouse, you were saying about, the fact that we don't know each other. And one thing that our community realized after 9/11 is that the reason it was so easy for so much, hateful propaganda to be spread about our community is that people didn't really know us. I think I saw a statistic a few years ago now that like 67% of Americans have never met a Muslim. And so if you don't know someone and you're getting all this information, even if you're skeptical, if you keep hearing something over and over again, that you're going to internalize that eventually. But if you have someone in your life, a colleague, a friend, someone you went to school with. I recently met up maybe 3 or 4 years ago with a friend from high school that I hadn't seen in like 10 years or 15 years. And she said, at my old workplace, I was working with all these people, and during the 2016 election cycle, they were saying all these terrible things about Muslims. And I just turned around and I said, one of my best friends in high school was a Muslim. I went to her house, I met her family. They're not like that. They're good people. And here I am, I was like, I didn't even think about, we were just friends. We were kids. I was just inviting her to my house and eating with her and spending time with her. I wasn't trying to preach anything to her. But knowing each other like that, it taught us so much about each other's, she is a Christian, she's a religious Christian. I learned about her, she learned about me. And I think it can be challenging when you are a small minority, because obviously a small minority is not going to be able to get to know everybody. And I know, technology can be it is a tool, so we can use it for good or evil. But I think now the other benefit of technology is that you can find out about others who are not like you. Of course, you have to be careful of fake news and all of that. But like you can, there are podcasts. It's so much more accessible to be able to put your story out there, even if you don't have a lot of power or a voice that can reach many people. So if you are, like you said, curiosity. If you're curious and you want to know about others, you can learn about each other. And I think that's really wonderful. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm biased because I'm a journalist. I work in media. So just take that with a grain of salt.
We're going to transition to, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you again to our panelists, which you'll continue to hear from them. But we want to transition to inviting you to share some of the questions that you have that have been like bubbling up or stirring up for you during this time together. I think we have some folks who are going to help us get to microphones. Yes. And what I might just invite us to do, sometimes we have commentary and sometimes we have questions. I might really invite us to lean into the questions and not our commentary. Okay.
Okay, I wrote my question down. Can you hear me? Might not be live. Just going to wing it. So I'm in adult Medicaid intake, right? And so I promise you, I hear all the stories. Can you hear me? No. Hello?
Sorry about that.
No worries. How about now? Yes. All right. So I'm in adult Medicaid intake. And I hear all the stories, right? And I promise you, the stories I hear cut across cultural and religious divides, right? And so my question is, what role do you see the church, and I want to be specific when I say the church, right? Meaning the institution that your faith is grounded in. What role does the church have in economic empowerment, if any? And do you see that role changing as the challenges that the community faces when it comes to financial empowerment change and become more dramatic over time?
I mean, I can start there. I think the church plays, the institutions of our faith play a huge role in the economic development of our communities, really because many of our faith spaces are the front line of tragedies and chaos and issues that we see within our communities. The issues that religious leaders are faced with might be quite similar to the issues that you face in the intake role. And it's very important for religious leaders to have connection with our partners in the community that are providing resources and service. Because oftentimes we can communicate things in a way that you may not be able to communicate because we know some of the complexities of what exists either in that family or within those communities. So as a pastoral leader, I've always been taught and always promoted that our work is not to be insular. In fact, our work is to be focused on our community because we wouldn't exist without the community that's around us. And then also that's just been the tradition of, I can say this has been the tradition of the Black church in America, being a space that was created because we were excluded from so many resources and services. So the first schools, education facilities for people, for Blacks in America came out of the church. Businesses derived out of the church. I pastor one of the oldest congregations in Cary, and to this day, the first Black businessman is buried in our cemetery. So that's a part of our lineage and our history. And so I think it's vital for us to be relevant because, as my co-panelists have said, it's not something that we just talk about, it's a way of life. So not only am I supposed to see someone who is hungry and feed them, I also need to be thinking about, going back to King, I need to be thinking about how do I dismantle the systems that are in place that keeps perpetuating poverty for my brother and sister so they can't feed themselves.
It's interesting because I think that we have such intersectionality. In our tradition, we turn to Isaiah, who says, I don't want your false prayers when you're going to go out and cheat in business. And in fact, I have an example that's just imprinted on my mind. I was at a temple for worship when I was a rabbinic student, and the rabbi was giving a sermon on the idea of our responsibility to the community. In the middle of this service, you couldn't have planted it better or worse, depending on the end of the story. A homeless person started walking down the aisle of the sanctuary and mumbling a little bit and not taking over yet. And I sat there curious to what the rabbi was going to do. And he kept going, ignoring this presence. And at some point, the president of the congregation got up and escorted him out. And later I learned, helped him. This man actually lived in one of the gardens of the synagogue. So yes, the end to the story is good, but what I thought was missed in that moment was, if we don't stop our worship to say what our real worship is right now, is helping this person, then these words mean nothing. And that our words and our actions have to be hand in hand, and the actions have to come first.
If I can add, with my parents actually started Hindu Society of North Carolina in Morrisville back in late 70s or mid 70s. But one of the things that our temple does is does health fair. So a lot of the doctors, a lot of the Hindu doctors in the community would dedicate their all day to do the health fair for anybody that wants to come. And they provide various services, actually, right? And so that's one of the way the community, they go out to, and it's not just for Hindu members of the community, but anybody. But also, a lot of the people that come to the temple looking for things that they need, exactly, I think what Rabbi, we're talking is, they need jobs or they need something. So connection, networking opportunities. So eventually the economic, development is kind of coexist. It's from, helping each other in various ways, like you both talked about, or we all talked about.
Other questions?
Right over there.
Talk right in. Okay. I work for the HIV STD community program, and one of my questions is, so we go out, and I see a great deal, almost our whole team here, we go out in the community and we hit the trenches. So we deal with a whole lot of different type of walk of life. So one thing I want to say is a lot of churches that is coming to help and assist and want us to be out there with them and whatnot. What is some of the things that you do as your church to go out in the community to actually not just talk about faith, but as she said, your actions? Because when we're out there, it's not about because you're a Christian or you a Baptist or you're this or that. It's basically, what can we do? What is your need? What can we help you with? And getting a lot of churches starting to come in and help and starting to come in and ask for us, for our sisters and stuff, is wonderful to us. So that's my question.
I think that these questions affirm the reality that your faith has to have feet. You have to actually do something, not just say something. Words are just empty if they're not followed by actions, and love has to be actualized by how we treat people. The church that I've just left after 13 years, we're only one of 2 churches in the state of North Carolina that has a camp every summer for abused children in foster care. And we have to work with social services. But those 5 days for the children are perhaps the best 5 days of the year. They're treated like royalty, and it's a wonderful environment. It takes volunteers who will take a week of their own vacation. We rent a camp over in Harnett County, one of the vacation capitals of the world, with gnats and all kinds of stuff. But for those who volunteer year after year after year, it costs about $25,000 to do that camp. But we always raise the funds a year in advance so we can guarantee those kids you can come back in next year, because we know we have those funds. When people buy into and invest in the reality of other people's painful existence, I think positive things do come to pass. And now, since that's been going on for a number of years, some of those children have gone on to high school and college, and now they're professionals and come back as volunteers in the camp. So I think there are things, when we say, I don't think the religious community is doing anything, you're just uninformed. There's a lot of stuff going on. You just don't know about it. Doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yeah. I would add to Dr. Seymour's point that I think every office in here that's represented should see the faith institution as an asset and a resource to call upon. Because the reality is that there are communities that are doing really good work. We're just not talking to one another about it, nor are we expanding each other's imagination to actually see what we could do when we put our resources together. I didn't think that when the pandemic occurred that we could get 27 faith communities together to distribute over 100,000 tons of food. But we got everybody in the room and put the idea in front of each other and said, hey, do you think you could utilize your resources or give us some people or some funds to do this? And the folks just said, you know what? Yeah, we can do it. And now I was talking, I know Manager Ellis walked out the room early, but I was talking to him because we've brought together some church communities in Cary, and I'm also in eastern Wake County, to say, we know you got land, and we have an affordable housing crisis here in Wake County. What would it look like if the churches could get together and utilize their land to put housing on it?
Wonderful.
Right.
Wonderful.
So if we're going to be intentional about being a community working together, we can't play into this divide of separate church and state. That divide is long gone. We need to think about how can we use these faith bodies as a resource to help promote the common good in our community and really bring together a space of peace and unity based upon the resources that we all have.
So I think that there's an interesting responsibility in the question, and in our community we try and be intentional. No congregation can serve all of the needs out there, and so we have a group of needs that we serve year in and year out. Our Guatemalan mission, or a couple of other, the Interfaith Food Shuttle, and we also then have nominated each year by people who are interested in our community a group of initiatives. And each year we have to decide and say, okay, this is the hands-on initiative, this is the change the legislation initiative to change the world, this is the interfaith initiative that we're going to be involved in. And so when we're intentional about that, I think that we're much more effective.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've come to the close of our time, and I don't take it lightly that this is how you chose to spend your Thursday afternoon, to be in the midst of this group of individuals and to honor one another, even in the ways in which we have asked questions and also responded to questions. I just really quickly want to ask our panelists if they would each very quickly share a charge that you would like to offer up to those who are here gathered this day.
I think the charge that I would leave all of you with is to open yourself up to the possibility of learning about someone that you didn't really consider before. Whether that's someone that you see every day but who you've never, gone beyond the surface with, or if it's someone that you've had maybe not the most comfortable interaction with. I think a lot of times I've been on the brunt of first impressions a lot. I think we all judge each other instantly when we see each other. For me, one of the things about the way I practice my faith is no one will ever not know that I'm a Muslim woman when they see me, right? That's the first thing that most people know about me when they see me. And so it's really good to let your first impression be what it is and then say, okay, but can I get to know you on a deeper level?
Thank you. As a professor, I always give homework, and this is on the final exam. The golden rule. Intentionally, for the next 30 days, starting tonight, treat other people how you would like to be treated. Think about it. It'll become natural by the 5th day, but for the next 21 to 30 days, only treat other people in your family, in the workplace, at Food Lion, that person in the car in front of you, and the light is just changed green, and in a nanosecond, they didn't treat them the way you'd like to be treated. You will change your world. I believe it.
I believe that we should all carry a posture of curiosity and a posture of hopefulness. And with that, I'll share what I share with my congregation and have shared with my congregation since March 5th, 2020. It's these words, and Lisa's been to our church and several other folks have been to our church, so they know that this is something that we say every time we meet, and that is, we are going to make it. And so from that posture of hopefulness and curiosity, my charge is that you share that with someone because there's someone around you that needs to hear it, needs to embrace that, and needs to believe it, that no matter what you're going through or no matter what we as a community are facing, that in the end, we are going to make it.
Well, you know it's dangerous. We're all clergy, and we will ordain you soon. We would like to, because your wisdom is so beautiful. So I don't have one, but I have two. Of course. So that's what clergy do, right? So the first is the most repeated law in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible, is that you will remember the stranger because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. All of us know what it feels like to be the stranger. And if that is our outlook going in every day to work, to understand that it's a blessing that there are those who are not like me in my midst. And then the corollary in Judaism, one of our, and perhaps the most well-known principle is shalom. Everybody knows, hello, goodbye, peace. All right. But it's not peace out. Shalom comes from this concept, shalem in Hebrew, which means wholeness. I cannot be whole unless I'm a part of a world and open myself to your wholeness. We're all interdependent. So reach out to the stranger, recognize their wholeness, even the stranger you think you know. Recognize their wholeness, respect, and bless that in your own way.
And if I can continue that, when we meet strangers, don't think of trying to tell them who we are and talking about us, who we are, so they understand us. Actually, do just the opposite of trying to be quiet and understand who they are before you trying to help them understand who we are. Understand who they are first, and then be understood by the other person. So understand what they're talking about, where they are coming from, and be open-minded about accepting them first before wanting to be accepted by others.
I'm Bud Davenport. I'm a member of the amazing WakeUP squad. And first of all, I want to thank Reverend Yabua.
I'll take the doctor.
You'll take the doctor? Yeah. And if she can ordain, we can do that, yeah. Thank you in this panel for an enlightening instruction. Let's give them a hand. And just because we worship different doesn't make us enemies. It doesn't make us enemies. So let's give them another round of applause. We want to thank our commissioners for being here today, for being the great leaders that you are, and for that great welcome, Commissioner Stallings. Thank you. And I'm going to go off script for just a second. There's somebody here that I think we need to recognize, Danya Perry. And we've seen it if you've been on the wire, but he was just recognized as being one of the top 100 influencers in the engaging local government leaders. And he has a lot to do with this group, and thank you for your leadership. This day, it's Lunch and Learn. And it's more than an opportunity to celebrate our differences. It's another opportunity to build culture, accelerate inclusion, and to build community, and to build Team Wake. But there's something special about coming around a table. You see, when you come around a table, you find common ground. And in that common ground, instead of hate, we find hope. At that table, we discover that we have eyes that don't see differences. They see dreams and desires. And at that table, we bury fear and we build friendships. We make a difference. You make a difference every day. And in those differences, we can grow together. Finally, if you're a member of the team WakeUp, if you're on that committee, please stand or raise your hand and let us recognize you for the work you've done. A special shout out to Cultural Affairs Subcommittee and the planning team that did this today, and you've already stood up, but thank you so much for what you're doing. Again, thanks to our Lunch and Learn leaders and David Ellis, our fearless leader who had to step out. Thanks for being a great leader. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your week.